Crank up the volume and get ready for real-world bird hunting by listening to the Wingmen Podcast by Eastmans. Now your host, Todd Helms.
This episode's brought to you by Federal Premium. Guys, I've been shooting federal shot shells for a really long time. You know, whenever I had to scratch up money from whatever chores I had to do and jobs I had to do when I was a kid, I always grabbed a box of Federal Premium. It worked for me back then, and it still works for me today. Everything from the TSS heavyweight black cloud loads to the traditional black cloud loads to the blue box speed shock and now the new heavy bismuth loads. Federal's got a load out there for your price point, your budget, and your level of performance that you're looking for. So, be like me, reach for Federal. That is my unashamed opinion.
Hey guys, welcome to this special episode of the Wingmen Podcast. And I say special, was the end of an era yesterday here at Wingmen. The dog that built the brand, Mackinaw, as you guys have all seen in the videos, and if you haven't seen, go to the Wingmen YouTube channel and check it out. All the older hunts. This brand would not have been possible to create without Mackinaw. And you're going to have to forgive me because it's definitely going to be an emotional podcast. The first things first, cheers, Mack. You were one heck of a boy. Let's take a look back. Mackinaw was an unsuspecting little puppy from Double T British Kennels in Kansas back when Haynes Floyd still owned that brand. It's changed hands. It's in good hands now with a new owner who I don't know. If you're listening to this, reach out. I'd love to have you on the podcast and chat. I bought Mackinaw when I was single, and I just met my wife, and I had a deposit down. It was time to get another dog, another lab. And I chose Double T British Kennels for the pedigree and for the breeding program that they had at that time. And holy smokes, did I get more than I bargained for with old Mackinaw dog. He's passed on. We put him down yesterday, about the same time. So it's been about 24 hours. But the process of him leaving has been ongoing for a while. Mackinaw was 12 years old, and in November, I was on a pheasant hunt with a friend of mine in Montana, and I was using Hondo. Mackinaw's hunting days were pretty much done. I was hoping this season to get another hunt or two out of Mackinaw, but wasn't meant to be. That was in God's hands. So, back in November, I was hunting pheasants and mule deer in Montana, and my wife called. She said, we're at the vet with Mackinaw. I don't think he's going to make it. And I said, what's going on? And she said, it seems like his heart is failing. I'd noticed he'd gotten big. Mackinaw was always a pretty lean dog. He never really overate. Feeding him was never hard, never an issue. But he'd gotten swollen, and his heart was failing, and he had developed a dry cough, like that. And anyway, that night after the first day, she was at the vet, and my wife, God bless her, spent 6 hours at the vet with him and my 3 children, because she was holding down the fort while I was gone, and got the news that you're going to have to medicate him and put him on statins, and he's got these other issues. And so that was in November, and he went into November as a very robust 12-year-old Labrador. Could get around. I was planning on hunting him, and he went downhill very, very quickly. He went from being the robust dog that you guys saw in the videos to a shell of himself. He, at the end yesterday, especially, he was skin and bones, and except for the great big fluid retaining belly that he had. I would be lying if I said that he's just a dog. You hear that? Oh, it's just a dog. It's just a dog. BS. It's never just a dog. Our dogs are, not only are they part of what we do as hunters, and if you're on the fence about hunting, I want you to hear my words. I want you to listen to this. Our dogs are not just tools. They are not just a dog. They're family. And Mackinaw in particular was an exceptional animal. His breeding was spectacular. Brought him home as a little furball pup, and the adventures began. I did not do everything right with him. There's a lot of things that if I could do different, I'd go back and I'd change some of the training that I did with Mack, the things that I feel like I've done right with Hondo. But that's how you learn. That's how you grow. You make mistakes. And Mackinaw and I made those mistakes together. But that first season, where I lived at that time, waterfowl hunting was extremely limited to almost non-existent. But we had lots of upland birds. We had lots of sharptail, and we had the state of Wyoming runs a really cool program where they raise pheasants in a couple different locations around the state, and they release those birds on public ground for people to hunt. Phenomenal way to introduce a young dog to hunting. Mackinaw, at the end of that first season, he went in as just a pup. He wasn't even near full grown. I think 6 months old, and I started hunting him on pheasants. Pen raised birds, controlled situation. And by the end of, from November to December, I think he had flushed and retrieved 60-some roosters. It's obviously not just me doing the shooting. That was several different people as well. But he went from being just a puppy to, man, he was a pheasant dog at the end of that. And that carried over his whole life. He loved upland hunting, and he was good at it. He was extremely good at it. You guys have seen nothing of him but duck hunting. And he was good. He was a great duck dog. But Mackinaw excelled at upland birds, at pheasants and sharptail. Basically, if he could flush it, man, it was in trouble. Mack was obviously helped build the Wingmen brand. Like I said earlier, without him, this brand wouldn't have taken flight. No pun intended. Because I wouldn't have had a dog and to use on these hunts. But a family member as well, a cherished family member. My wife and I sat down yesterday after we put him down. It was time, and I'll get to that in a minute. We sat down. We started going through video on YouTube. You guys can go check out all the videos. He's in them. All the older videos, Mackinaw's featured prominently. And then all the pictures on our phones. And my wife has pictures from all the way back to when our daughter was born. And I remember when we brought my oldest daughter home, Mackinaw was 3. I think he was 3 years old. He was enamored with her, just enamored. He sat by her crib and just looked at her for hours. And if he wasn't looking at her, he was sleeping next to the crib. That was his baby. I remember when my folks were out, my wife's folks were out for the birth of my oldest daughter, and my dad was holding JC in his arms, and she started to fuss. It was the first day we had her home, and so Mackinaw was like, he was always a protective dog. We'll get into that in a minute too. And JC started to fuss in my dad's arms, and Mackinaw got right in his face. And he wasn't aggressive. He was just right there. Like, what are you doing? What's going on? Why is she crying? And it's easy to project human emotion on animals, especially our pets, our dogs. But there was no doubt that he was her protector. And going back through my wife's pictures and my pictures yesterday, every photo of my kids, Mackinaw's in them. He's somewhere, especially of my firstborn. The time period between when my oldest daughter, JC, was born and my youngest daughter, Ennis, was born, Mackinaw is literally in every picture of JC. And she's got stuff draped on him. He was her dress-up toy. She dressed him up. She did everything but paint his nails. And I think we might have painted his nails once, or she might have painted his nails once. I don't remember. But he was always so patient and so loving and protective and kind. And that's just who he was, as well as being a top-notch duck dog, a top-notch retriever, a top-notch hunting dog. Up and birds, phenomenal. Retrieving, he was solid, steady. He was great. But the videos, the early Wingman videos, will show you Mackinaw, warts and all. And I hope you go back and I hope you watch them. And I hope you see a dog that was not perfect. A dog that was extremely good at what he did, but not perfect. Wasn't trained perfectly because I'm not perfect. I don't know everything about dog training. I try my best, and I've taken the lessons that I learned from Mackinaw, like crate training, and applied them to Hondo. And Hondo is a more well-trained dog. Obviously a different dog than Mackinaw. Very good in his own right. But, man, there's only one. There's only one Mackinaw. And you guys that have been following the channel and following Wingmen for a while have seen pictures, have seen videos, and you get it. And I've gotten comments from a lot of you about, man, that's a great dog. He's so cool. Yes, he was. But other than this being a tribute, it's to you, Mack.
This episode of the Wingmen Podcast is brought to you by Leupold Optics. You know, I've been running Leupold Optics for a long time on the big game side of things, and I love the performance and the quality of that brand. But when Leupold brought performance eyewear into the mix a couple of years ago, I thought I'd seen it all, but I was wrong. That performance eyewear from Leupold keeps my eyes protected. It helps me with my target acquisition with a crisp, clear sight picture. And guys, I got to be honest with you, I'm stoked to be partnered with a company like Leupold. So for all your optics needs, give Leupold a look.
I wanted to talk about what it's like, the process of taking a dog from a puppy all the way through to putting him down at the vet. It's the first time I'd ever done that. The childhood dog we had, black lab named Carly. Phenomenal dog, zero training. My dad was busy school administrator. We were kids. Everything that dog ever did was just raw talent, which I look back at that. We talk about that and go, wow. Imagine if you'd actually trained that dog. She'd have been incredible. Great dog. But I wasn't home when it came time to put Carly down. She lived till she was, I think, 14. I was in college and I was away when all of that happened. So it was sad, but I wasn't there for it. My first dog was a little female lab named Josie. That was my first, on my own dog. First dog I ever bought. First dog I ever trained. And I put my heart and soul into training that dog. And I used the old Richard Walters book, Duck Dog. And, man, I trained that dog I was single. I worked second shift, sorry. So I worked afternoons. I worked that dog. I didn't have anything else to do. She was amazing. If you ask anybody that got to spend any time around her, whether it's friends or my brother, she was exceptional. Only one Josie dog. And she got hit by a car when she was 3. And I won't go into the details of that. It was a little bit of neglect, I won't say neglect, it was a little bit of stupidity on my part, and a little bit of just God's plan. And after that, it was really hard for me to want another dog for a really, really long time. And then when I decided it was time, along came Mackinaw. And he, for the last 12 years, has been a fixture in my life, in our household, in our kids' lives, and in everything we do here for Wingmen. But he was not perfect, as any of us understand about ourselves and our own dogs. And a lot of that, all of it actually, is my fault. And it has to do with training. And so when I talk about this, the things that I've learned, I want you to hear this as a voice of experience and a voice of things to do and things to not do. The number one thing to do, love them. Love your dogs. They're not tools. They're not just a dog. As I said earlier, love them. That comes with discipline. That comes with training. That comes with expectations. That comes with being hard on them and having a bar that you want them to a standard that you hold them to. It doesn't mean don't train them. It doesn't mean let them get away with murder. But you love them. It's okay if they sleep on the bed every now and then, as long as you call them up there. It's okay if they make a mistake in the field and break or don't do exactly what you want them to do. You know, if I could go back, I'd have been a lot more forgiving and understanding of the things that Mackinaw fell short at. He was so smart that he was difficult to work with at times, because if he didn't want to do it or thought he was going to get hurt, he would not do it. He's a lot like a mule. Any of you that have experience with stock horses and mules, you understand that you can make a horse do just about anything you want it to do. You can bargain with a mule. Mules have a lot higher sense of self-preservation than a horse does. Mackinaw was a mule. Ice. I think about ice, our icy conditions that we hunt out here late in the season. That dog hated to jump off of things, whether it was an ice shelf or a bank or a dock, getting that big launch into the water. Hondo was great at that. My first lab, Josie, she'd launch 15, 20 feet. Mackinaw would figure out a way to ease into the water. Once he got in the water, man, he was hell-bent for leather. He was going, and nothing would stop him from getting a bird, as you have seen multiple times on video. I think about the cliff retrieve on the goose. The amount of drive that it takes for a dog to do that, the amount of heart that it takes for a dog to do that, to accomplish that retrieve, is mind-blowing, to be honest. And so I never questioned Mackinaw's heart. I guess I did for a little while, maybe question his drive a little bit. But then as I matured and got a little older and hunted with him more, I realized it's not lack of drive or lack of heart. He's smart. It's self-preservation. And that played into his training. If I could go back and train him, I'd do it so much different. And I'd probably end up with the same result I did, but with a dog that was headstrong and would do what he wanted to do most all the time. And if it fell within the parameters of what I wanted, maybe. But he never let me down. And I have a list of stories, a pile of stories that prove all of that. But the thing that I look at the most when comparing Mackinaw with Hondo and the training in the middle, different. Every dog's different. Every dog's different. When you take a dog like Mackinaw, I wish I would have realized sooner how smart he was, because I would have not been so heavy-handed in my training with him. So I have to get him to do what I want to do, instead of encouraging him to do what he's good at and playing it to his strengths. Mackinaw marked birds incredibly well. Better than, I think probably better than any dog I've ever hunted with. He could mark birds down from ridiculous distances. And anybody who's hunted with him or seen the videos, you've seen snippets of that. He knew where stuff was. He was constantly keeping tabs on things. He was not a steady Labrador. He would break, especially when I shot. That tempered as he got older, where he wanted to see everything that was going on before he took off. Yeah, not the perfectly trained dog, but he was a great duck dog. He was perfect in his own way. Had a phobia of ice, hated the ice, didn't like being on it. Smart, man. Smart dog. Yeah, if I could go back, I'd train him different. But I would, and I love him a lot more. I love him a lot more. So if you're listening to this or watching this, love your dogs, man. Don't be afraid of investing yourself 100% into your dog. They're not a tool. They're not just a dog. Love them. Take them everywhere you go, if it's feasible. When you can, don't be stupid about things. I've recorded a podcast about knowing when to leave your dog behind. But if you can take your dog, take them. Make them a part of what you do. They will be better off for it, and so will you in the long run. And I feel like I did a pretty decent job of that with Mackinaw. He went everywhere we did. Camping trips, fishing trips. Dog loved to fish. Loved being in the mountains. Loved to hunt. We get to hunt these dogs from September to February. Varies accordingly. That's it. September to February. The rest of the year, they're pets. They're part of our families. They don't just live in a crate or live in a kennel. At least I hope they don't. I know Mackinaw didn't. They go everywhere we go, when it's possible, when it's feasible. Love them, because you only got them for a short time. 12 years is like, wow, it's 12 years. Some labs live longer, some live shorter. I've had both, but 12 years isn't enough time. And think about, as a tribute to Mackinaw, I also want to share some stories, some of my favorite stories with you from him. You guys have seen, or if you haven't seen, I would encourage you to go to the YouTube channel and find the video called The Goodest Boy or Super Dog, or it's something like that. There's a goose retrieve that he did on a family-style goose hunt. A bunch of us dads from the office got together, and we went on a goose hunt. And we sailed this bird. It was the last bird of the day, and we sailed it. And it died, but it fell dead on top of this large cliff embankment. And this embankment is vertical from the river. It's not 90 degrees, but, man, it's close. It's hands and knees if a human can go up it at all without rope. And I thought, I'm going to send Mack, see if he can get it. I sent him across the river. He'd marked the bird down, so he knew it was there, but he didn't know exactly where it was. I sent him. He swims the river. He gets to this bank, and he's got to work. And he could smell it. By this time, the scent from the bird is wafting over this big, steep embankment. And he's working and working and working and working and working. And he gets up, 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 up. And he gets to the last bit, and it's sheer cliff. It's straight up and down. And it's probably 3 feet tall. Yeah, probably 3 feet. Mack's not a big dog. 62 pounds at his peak. 63 maybe. Never a big dog. And he jumps and he grabs with his front feet. And he does a pull-up. And he pulls himself up on this bank and gets himself up there, which is a feat in and of itself. And then goes out of sight. The next time I see him, he's coming back with a goose in his mouth. This is a goose. 60-pound dog, 10-pound goose. Do the math. That's hard. And here he comes. Bails off that little cliff edge, and then works his way down, swims the river, and brings it to me. And this is the last retrieve of 17 retrieves that day. All geese. And, I mean, everybody was blown away. It's an amazing retrieve. And a lot of us have stories about dogs that do things like that. And because dogs are incredible, they enrich our lives. They add to our lives. And Mackinaw was no exception to that rule. That retrieve is singular in his hunting career, and he did a lot of amazing stuff, but that retrieve stands out the most for me. And this is a dog that I go back to when he was a puppy hunting pheasants. And he just a pup. I sailed this rooster that he flushed, and it sailed down and fell dead, tumbled out of the sky into this patch of wild plums. It's plum thicket. And Mackinaw runs, and he marks, again, back to his phenomenal marking ability, just as a little shaver. He marks the bird, and he goes running down there and gets in the plum thicket, and I can kind of see him. And he finds the bird. I could tell he finds the bird, but all of a sudden he's like, comes out, and he's like shaking his head and pawing at his face. It's like, what is going on? And he runs all the way back to me, and he got into a porcupine in that thicket where the rooster fell. And he runs all the way back to me, and he's got like 4 quills in his nose, and they're dangling. He probably just got close and sniffed, and that porky whapped him in the face. So I grab him, looking him over, and I pulled all the quills out, and I opened his mouth, and I'm looking, I'm like, you're good. And I pulled the quills out, and I didn't even have to say fetch it up. He just turned and ran back down to the thicket, got the bird, and came back. That is a hunting dog. That's not on camera, way before Wingmen, but it's a Mackinaw story that's legend in my mind. Another one that is kind of related. Luke Washington here, one of the staffers here, was helping me clean out the blind, one of our blinds after season was over. I had Mackinaw with me, and I look across the river, and there's an orange bumper, dog training bumper, floating in the water. I was like, oh, that's weird. It must have washed in from upstream. Somebody lost the bumper. So I send Mack. He doesn't know it's there. He can't see it. Line him up, and I send him. Mackinaw. Across the river he goes. Gets to the other bank, and he kind of like looking, and Mackinaw never had a lot of handle. I couldn't really handle him. He was just kind of hunted. I'd get him close, and he'd hunt. And he's hunting, and finally he stops, and he would stop on his own, and he'd look at me. And then I could direct him. And so he stops, and I'm like, over. You need to go left. He goes left, and then he sees the bumper, and he's like, oh, I got it. He goes over, and he grabs the bumper, and he's pulling on it. Just pulling it, yanking. And he can't get it free. Well, the cord on the bumper was all wrapped up in some roots or on a stick, or he couldn't pull it free. And most dogs, Hondo included, would have just yanked and yanked and yanked and yanked and yanked and either given up or pulled it free eventually. Not Mackinaw. Smart boy that he was. I see him shift, his position on the bumper, and I can't really tell what he's doing. And then I kind of look, and he moves a little bit, and he is chewing the cord off the bumper. The dog chewed the cord off the bumper and then fetched it to hand. And it's not on camera. And it's probably one of the most amazing retrieves, bird or no bird, that I've ever seen a dog make. And that was Mackinaw, guys. Special dog. Special dog. Just smart, huge heart, huge drive, but came with a self-preservation instinct that, just phenomenal. And that self-preservation instinct played into a protective side of him as well. And that protective side of him saved my bacon twice on big game hunts for elk. It's no secret where we live is riddled, overpopulated with grizzly bears. And they throw a wrinkle into your elk hunting. There's no doubt about it. And twice on big game hunts, Mackinaw, once in particular, the second time in particular, Mackinaw likely, if he didn't save my life, he definitely saved me from being chewed upon by a grizzly bear. And it goes back to that self-preservation instinct and that protective nature. When he was little, just a little tiny puppy, I took him fishing with my uncle at night in Michigan on the Hex Hatch, if you guys know anything about that. If not, Google it. And some dudes were coming down the bank with their headlamps on, and here's this little tiny puppy who's like 9-10 weeks old, and he's growling at these guys. He just sees lights, and he's growling. And Mackinaw was always protective. Back to the story with my dad and JC, he was always protective. And that spilled over into being protective of me and my family when we were on camping trips and hunting trips. Long story short, the second time is the most impressive, so I'll just go to that one. A friend of mine had knocked down a bull elk right at dark in grizzly territory, heavily infested grizzly country. And we knew it, so we were mentally prepared for this. I built a huge fire. We start breaking down this bull, and I build a huge fire so we can see, and it's a full moon night, very bright. There's snow on the ground. And we're almost done butchering this elk. Almost done. Getting ready for the pack out. And Mackinaw starts growling, his best old yeller growl. And barks, and he's looking in a specific spot. And I shield my eyes from the firelight, and I kind of look on my headlamp, and sitting 50 yards away in the edge of the trees is this massive grizzly bear. And he wanted that elk really badly, but he was not willing to push the issue with two guys, and more importantly, the Labrador Retriever named Mackinaw standing guard. And Mackinaw sat there and growled and barked at him for the next 15 or 20 minutes until we were able to finish butchering the elk, get it packed up, and get it out of there. And we were on the clock at that point. We knew, but Mackinaw bought us time. If I would not have had Mackinaw on that hunt, on that elk hunt, that bear very likely would have come in and pushed the issue and tried to force us off that elk. I don't know what would have happened. I could speculate. It would have been ugly for both the bear and us. But having Mackinaw there and having his protective nature and that self-preservation instinct that he possessed, he saved our butts, man. There's no doubt about it. It ended up being a non-issue. We recovered all the meat. It wasn't a big deal because I had Mackinaw. Phenomenal dog. And again, not just a dog, not a tool. Part of the family. Part of the family. And I know not everybody has a grizzly bear story with their Labrador or their bird dog. But you have something. You have some story. And that's the reason that bird dogs and retrievers and whatever you want to say, I don't classify Labradors as bird dogs. I have a tendency to call them, they're Labradors. They're Labrador retrievers. They're retrievers. And a lot of them, like Mackinaw, excel at hunting upland game as well as a flushing dog. That's great. But I kind of tend to classify bird dogs as the pointing breeds or like dedicated flushers like Springer Spaniels. Those are bird dogs in my mind. But that doesn't matter. Whether you have a Labrador or a Drothar or a Brittany or a Pointer, whatever you have, that you're going to go through the same stuff, and I'm sure most of you have already, where you lose a dog. Whether it's to a tragic accident, like my Josie girl, or it's one living a full life and then coming to an end like Mackinaw did yesterday. Embrace it. Don't shy away from it. And don't let it be an excuse for you to not buy that dog, to not train that dog, to not invest yourself in that dog. Because what you get out of it in experiences and in memories and in just everything outweighs the hurt. It outweighs the pain. Yeah, I'm emotional right now. But there's a weird, looking back at all of it, there's this weird feeling of relief. I watched Mackinaw go downhill for over 2 months. And I hated it. I knew it was coming. My wife and I prepared our kids. And then when yesterday happened, it was like on Monday. Yesterday was Tuesday. It's Wednesday now. On Monday, it became very apparent that he was done. Couldn't really get up on his own. Wasn't eating anymore. Was uncomfortable. And to that point, he was failing, but he could still get up, just go outside, go to the bathroom, sit in the sun, just kind of, enjoy being a senior citizen. But on Monday, it was a definite turn, and I could recognize it. Because my wife and I asked ourselves, how are we going to know when it's time? You're going to know. You're going to know. And Monday was a definite, it's time. Made the calls, got it organized, did it, had him put down yesterday, ended his suffering yesterday. And the relief that came with that is not something that I was expecting. This podcast, sitting here talking to a camera about all of this, it brings some closure, I guess. Not something I expected. The amount of relief, and it's a weird thing to say, oh, I'm relieved he's gone. But man, we've been waiting on this and riding this, I don't know, train since November. It's like he's not going to get better. He's 12 years old. This is it. Weird sense of relief that is hard to put into words. It's hard to describe. But he's gone and his suffering's over. And I can look back now, as we all can, and look at all the awesome memories. I shared some stories with you in this. Go back, watch the videos, look at the old social media posts. Quite the dog. And I'm not alone in that. Everybody's got a special dog. And my heart goes out to you guys that are getting ready to put dogs down or have put dogs down. This is my first. I've never done that until yesterday. And thank goodness we don't live in a time anymore when I have to go out and shoot a dog. Because, yeah, there's going to be people out there that are hard asses and they're like, You owe it to the dog to do it yourself. Nah. The way he went yesterday was peaceful. It was quick. He didn't feel a thing. It didn't scare him. It was time, and it was the right thing to do. And Mackinaw, I hope you're in heaven waiting for me, buddy. I don't know. But I hope so. And if you are, cheers, man. Enjoy all them ducks and geese that you get to fetch and retrieve and do whatever you're doing. And that might be a touch blasphemous to say, but I don't know. I hope so. I hope he's waiting there for me. But I don't know. Love your dogs, guys. Love them. Enjoy them. Do the best you can do and realize that in the end, they're imperfect creations just like the rest of us. They make mistakes. They need grace. And Mackinaw, thank you. Thank you for 12 years of fun, 12 years of frustration. You had a penchant for running away. My wife and I's honeymoon. Mackinaw, I had a friend watching him, and Mackinaw escaped. Like, he did a lot in his lifetime. And he was gone for 5 days. And my buddy at the time did not want to spoil our honeymoon. And so he didn't tell me until the very last day of our honeymoon that Mackinaw had been missing for 5 days. Oh, it all worked out. He'd been at the shelter for 4 of those 5 days. And the people at the shelter loved him so much because he was so friendly and sweet and nice that they didn't even put him in a crate. He just hung out in the office during the day. Anyway, we got him back. And that was Mackinaw, man. He did things his own way. He lived life his own way. I did the best I could training him. And all I can hope is that I did the best I could loving him. I think I did. I'm starting to ramble with this, guys. So I'm going to close it down. Yeah. Mackinaw, quite the dog. Phenomenal Labrador. Phenomenal breeding. Okay training on my part. He was an incredible dog. And everything that Wingmen stands upon is built on his paws. You know, Hondo's following in massive paw prints and has a lot to live up to. But, man, I wouldn't have it any other way. Mistakes and all, warts and all, whatever you want to call it. Mackinaw, you were a phenomenal dog. Phenomenal dog. Guys, do the best you can with your dogs, but give yourself and them some grace. Love them. They're not tools. They're not just a dog. So, that's probably enough about that. Love you, buddy. Here's to Mackinaw.